Thanks for joining us tonight. A little bit of background on Darryl before we get into some things with him, Tony. Spent 13 seasons in the major leagues between 1988 and 2001. Played with Milwaukee, Texas, San Francisco, Colorado, and the Mets. Garnered over 1,300 hits in his career, stole 163 bases. Very impressive that he was a .291 lifetime hitter. And Darryl, what impressed me, I did a little research, but basically today, out of all of your statistics while you were playing baseball, thing that stood out to me was that you made only 14 errors in 13 seasons for a .995 percentage. Was that something, Darryl, that you really took pride in, your outfield defense?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I wasn't a power hitter. I didn't put up a lot of home runs. I was a good hitter, but I wasn't, a guy who hit 340 or 350. So I was kind of in that average range of players that made it to the big leagues, and I wanted to stand out in something. So I've always worked hard on defense. That's one of the things I pride myself in, and I was fortunate enough to do well in the big leagues with it.
And you did a great job at it, Darryl. And just looking at the stops where you played, spent about 7 or 8 years in Milwaukee, the Texas. I was thinking about the difference in climates and everything, Tony. When you go from Milwaukee, the heat of Texas, then you go out to San Francisco where you have the wind and the cold, and then you have the thin air of Colorado where obviously
Shea Stadium,
helps.
No slight for
and
wind
the Mets,
there.
so you went back and forth. And tell us, Darryl, about those about the 5 stops. Which one probably stood out more as far as a place? Well, first of all, tell us where you like to play the best.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one because, I came up through the Milwaukee system, and I spent 7 years in Milwaukee in the big leagues. So that was all I knew about the big leagues. And so I was happy to be there. I mean, I was pleased to be in a city like Milwaukee, which, you had 1 or 2 beat writers. You really didn't get bothered that much. The fans were, always supporting you. So it was kind of a laid-back approach of being in the big leagues. Then going to Texas, which basically where I live now. I've been in Texas in the off season for 20 years. So this is pretty much my home state. And having my family able to come see me a lot was great. I mean, I really enjoyed my time with Texas, and it only lasted for a year. But San Francisco was really fun because that was really the first true sense of what I felt like being in big leagues was all about. I mean, I was in a big city. I mean, the tradition of being a San Francisco Giant was huge. Playing center field for the San Francisco Giants was something that I could have never imagined. So that was probably the first place that I really felt like, and no disrespect to any other place, but that was the first place I really felt like I was in the big leagues.
Absolutely. And you had 4 years in Milwaukee, Joe, where you hit .295 or higher. You must have loved hitting there. But I noticed they hit .335 for Colorado in '98. Do you think that thin air in Colorado definitely helps the hitters?
Well, at that
it's
time,
a ballpark guy.
They've changed it a little bit now with the using the humidor and storing the balls that way. But if anyone were to tell you that there's not a difference between any place in the big leagues and Colorado, they're lying because there is a difference. You could truly tell the difference. I mean, I knew it from the times that I would go there and play against the Rockies, and being there on pretty much an everyday basis for the regular season. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, you really sensed it in batting practice because you're hitting balls in batting practice that you never thought you could hit. And it just, I'm a firm believer that, baseball, being in the big leagues and hitting is all about confidence. And if you're in batting practice and you're hitting balls off the back wall, and you're sitting there saying to yourself, wow, I can do this in the game, sometimes it carries over, and it gives you a little more confidence as you go to the plate.
Yeah, and that's probably what people like Todd Helton, Tony, Larry Walker are always going to have that little cloud over their head that they played too long in Colorado.
You're absolutely right.
But, hey, give them credit for staying there. They know where they're
Well, I mean, you got to be smart in the sense that you have to understand the elements. I mean, no one has really complained too much about any player that's played a long period of time in Boston. I mean, Fenway Park is a great ballpark to hit in, especially if you're, a left-handed hitter that can go the opposite way. I mean, you can get a million doubles there day in and day out. And, Wade Boggs did that. That was his bread and butter. and
Gates
is it
Brown
fair?
said the same thing.
Yeah, is it fair? No. I mean, I think it's fair because you play with what's given to you, and that's the way the ballpark is, and you do the best you can in that ballpark.
I agree. You're watching Monday Night Sports Talk here on CTV 14. On the phone with us, Darryl Hamilton, former Major League player. Let's get to your current job right now. Darryl, you're the Senior Specialist of On-Field Operation. This is after you had been, you spent a few years as an on-air host for MLB.com's MLB Radio. Maybe you could tell us maybe about a minute or so what your current job entails.
Well, basically, I work with Bob Watson, who is the disciplinarian in Major League Baseball. Fines, suspensions. We deal with umpires, pace of play, signage, all these things that happen that are on the field. We have a stake in, and it's an interesting job because I enjoyed my time on radio and TV, but I got kind of bored in the sense that I wanted to say something that would have an effect on the game. And not just talk about it, but actually put my fingerprint on it and say, this is what I want to happen, and kind of go from there. And I'm fortunate enough that the job offer came across, and that's what I'm doing now. And it's been a treat the 3 years I've been doing it.
So, my co-host Tony has a question for you, Darryl.
Sure.
Darryl, it's a pleasure to have you this evening. I'm going to describe a little scenario. You come home at night and the Yankees are playing the Red Sox, and there's an incredible altercation. You go to the office the next day. What are you faced with? What must you do?
Well, the neat thing about it is that Major League Baseball has kind of switched over to the technology that's out there. And what we do is if there's a big brawl like that, we get video, and guys at the office will get the video and basically feed us the video. We'll take a look at every aspect. We'll get the umpire's report. They'll send in a report after the game, and we'll get it either that night in our email or the next morning, and we'll go over on what the umpires talked about, and we'll kind of match it up with the video and make a decision from there.
And Darryl, is it tough to, well, when you have to make decisions regarding disciplinary things and things like that, is that hard to do when you're dealing with guys that you were a member of the same union that they were?
Essentially a contemporary.
It's tough, but you have to separate yourself from that. I mean, probably the toughest decision I had last year was being involved in the suspension with Gary Sheffield. Mm-hmm. Because, Gary and I were roommates coming up with Milwaukee.
Boy.
So that was, I had to kind of step aside and say, you know what, this is one of my good friends, but I can't look at it that way. I mean, I've got to look at it as if, I'm put the video in front of me, I'm reading the umpire's report, and I have to determine what went down and judge from that standpoint. I mean, once you get personal feelings involved, that's when it gets very difficult. So I try to separate myself from there and just focus on the facts.
And Darryl, in addition to the disciplinary stuff, reading a little bit, and Tony's telling me you've always also done things such as you have to scrutinize advertisements, you limit visual distractions, anything that has to do with the field of play,
displays.
things like that. It was once, I guess you had to change color on a sign at Yankee Stadium. Are these things that you really have to stay on top of because they could change overnight?
Well, yeah, they could, but, the neat thing about it is that I think that now the ball clubs are starting to realize that there is a problem in some cases with signage in Major League Baseball. I mean, I've seen it, and I've seen it from the other side to where I was on the field, being in center field or being in the outfield, and a ball hit to me, and I can't see it for the first, 2 or 3 steps. And it's a scary situation for a player, and that's coming from a player who was in the outfield. I couldn't imagine from someone at shortstop or third base, which basically have no time to react on a ball that comes to them, seeing a sign in the background where it's all white and that white ball gets caught up in it. And, I mean, you've seen it millions of times. I know fans probably have seen it a dozen times at least last year alone where a ball is hit to a player and he looks totally clueless on it. He's putting his glove up and he's trying to, defend himself. And basically what happens is that sign behind home plate or that sign somewhere in the stands has, took their focus from the baseball itself, and it's kind of blended in. So what we try to do is we're trying to make the signs behind home plate and the outfield walls a little bit darker. So that white ball will actually stand out. Now, it's a lot easier doing it behind home plate because we're looking at it from the player's point of view, but we also have to look at the umpire's point of view as well because, you know, they have a tough job, and I've learned that from being on this side as well. There are times where they can't see either, and that's why we're kind of focusing on the outfield walls because, you know, we don't want that ball to get caught up in that white on the wall and all of a sudden the umpire's not making the right call because he didn't see it. So we're looking at it from not only the player's standpoint but from the umpires as well.
Well, it's great that they're paying attention to this, Tony,
Yeah.
because some of these stadiums, just the way they're set up, a la Minnesota, although they're going to be moving, and Tampa Bay,
Right.
just those places are tough enough to play in, and never mind any kind of other distractions.
And you know, Darryl, that's an interesting point because Bob and I talk about that a lot. The traditional ballparks that we might have seen growing up, and we're guys close to 50 that were more or less conditioned in a nonsense for the game of baseball. Now you're touring the new Yankee Stadium and the new Citi Field. I mean, to me, these places are like entertainment meccas. And I mean, have you had particular challenges there with the signage and perhaps trying to get the game of baseball to play through as baseball as opposed to, shall we say, entertainment?
Well, we have to look at it from 2 point of views. One is that obviously we want the field to be in perfect condition to where the players go out and perform their best. I mean, we want it to be a top-notch situation to where they don't worry about anything but going out and play baseball. But we also understand that from the corporate point of view, the bills have to be paid.
Sure.
And both of these stadiums in New York are high-priced stadiums. And, corporate sales are going to be huge as far as keeping those stadiums on board. So, I try to deal with the corporate side with a lot of these companies and let them know what we're trying to do. And a lot of them have jumped on board and said, we understand. We're not going to give you any problems. With that in mind, I hadn't seen anything that has me discouraged about the 2 new fields in New York, but they haven't put up the signage behind home plate or in the outfield yet. We've got another walkthrough in late January, so we'll probably have a lot of stuff up by then. So we'll have a better chance of assessing what's going on with the signage itself.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're watching Monday Night Sports Talk. We have a couple minutes left with former Major League ball player Darryl Hamilton, now working with Major League Baseball. Darryl, back to your playing days just for a bit. I was looking at some of your teammates over the years, and it's amazing how many probably Hall of Famers you played with. I'm talking
Quite
guys
a
like
bit.
Molitor, Yount, Irod, maybe someday,
Right.
Tony Piazza, Walker. We can go on and on. Maybe pick one of these guys, Darryl, and tell us what it was like playing with a Hall of Famer on the same team.
Wow. Starting off in Milwaukee with Yount and Molitor, they were probably the biggest influences on me as far as being a Major League player because I watched them day in and day out and learned how to play in the big leagues from them. There are a lot of guys who are great talents, who are great players but don't know how to play the game. Those 2 guys knew how to play the game. They prepared themselves every day to play, and they went out there and played hard every day. Learning that, it kind of brought me over to other places and see how other superstars kind of handle situations. Some guys better, some guys not as good, but the guys that I play with, the Hall of Famers you're talking about, it was impressive to see it. I mean, I learned a lot by playing in San Francisco with Barry Bonds. I mean, he prepared himself on the same level as Yount and Molitor in the sense that, he understood it was 162 games. You can't be high, you can't be low. You have to stay in that middle ground, and you have to keep that kind of attitude throughout the season because once you get away from that, you're going to have problems getting ready for the next game. So, seeing guys prepare themselves like that was pretty impressive.
And Darryl, when I think of guys like Molitor and Yount, I just think of guys, as you said the magic word, that played hard all the time.
Yes.
I just remember those guys with always wearing the eye black, always having their dirty uniforms, but they hustled everything out, and they were just so fun to watch. And I said, thank God I was watching Yount since he was 19 years old, but
when he came
it was a fun thing to see. Tony, got about a minute left. Yeah,
and Darryl, as far as the current day economic environment, you mentioned the stadiums in New York and how critical the corporate dollars are. There's no secret with the Mets that Mr. Wilpon has had a little issue with Mr. Madoff. Do you see this impacting Major League Baseball in this year to come, or what shall we expect?
Well, it's going to impact. I know it doesn't seem that way right now, especially with the dollars being thrown out to a few players in the league, but there will be an economic impact, I think, coming up this season. We're trying to do our best not to pass the so-called losses to the fans. We want to keep that baseball ticket as low as any other sporting event out there. And I think we are very competitive with all the major sports. But it's going to be a difficult time. I mean, at MLB, we pull back a lot of things coming up this season. We're not going to be adding on anybody. We're not going to be having any salary increases. Everything's going to be pretty much the same as it was last year, and trying to save jobs. And I'm sure everybody at MLB really appreciate all the stuff they're trying to do on that end. But when it comes down to it, it's for the fans. And we hope that we can continue to keep our game the lowest price ticket of all the major sports, and I think we're going to continue to do that.
Well, Darryl, I want to wish you and your family a Happy New Year, and we appreciate you taking the time out to give us a call tonight, and we wish you continued luck in your current position, and again, good luck this year, and thanks for being on the show.
And certainly every success, Darryl.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. You guys have a Happy New Year. Take care.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.